In a small, dusty town nestled between rolling hills, the air always felt heavy with untold stories. The townsfolk lived under a cloud of fear and mistrust, for this place had seen its share of violence. Ghosts of past conflicts lingered in every corner, whispering reminders of the injustice that seeped into everyday life. The flickering street lamps cast long shadows, often mirroring the dark hearts of those who had lost their way. For years, the community struggled to find balance between right and wrong. Some residents clung to old grudges while others yearned for peace. Children played in the dirt streets, unaware of the tension that simmered just below the surface. Adults exchanged wary glances as they passed one another, each person holding their own secrets and fears close to their chest. In the heart of this town stood a weathered courthouse, where cases were heard but rarely resolved. Many felt justice was a distant dream, out of reach amidst the growing despair. It was here, in this divided place, that a new tale would unfold. A story about loss, courage, and an unexpected hero known only as the Silent Cowboy. As whispers of discontent grew louder with each passing day, tensions reached a breaking point that would soon lead to unspeakable actions. A reckoning was coming, one that would challenge everything the townsfolk believed about justice. The widow, Clara, had once known the warmth of love and laughter in her home. Now, her world was cloaked in sorrow after her husband, James, was taken from her in a brutal act fueled by rage and fear. He had been a kind man, respected for his quiet strength and fairness, often helping neighbors settle disputes peacefully. But in a moment of misunderstanding, the mob seized upon old grudges and accusations, dragging him away to face a fate no one could stop. Clara remembered their last conversation. It echoed in her mind like a haunting melody. James had promised to return as he walked out the door, full of hope for a brighter day. But that day never came. As she sat alone in the dim light of their small cottage, memories flooded her heart. Each picture on the wall told a story of happier times. Their laughter once filled the air, now replaced by heavy silence. Each tear that fell felt like a testimony to the love they shared. She grappled with the unjust nature of his death, feeling an ache that cut deeper than any blade. As sleep eluded her night after night, Clara plotted how she could make the townsfolk face the truth of what had happened. A truth that demanded justice for her beloved husband. The tension of that night still loomed, promising more than mere grieving. It heralded a reckoning that would change everything. In the shadow of Clara's despair, another figure moved through the town, the Silent Cowboy. Known simply as Clay, he was a man of few words, preferring the company of his horse over that of townsfolk. With a weathered hat pulled low and a rugged coat that had seen many seasons, he embodied strength and resilience. Clay had arrived in the town years ago, a drifter with a past shrouded in mystery. Some whispered he had once been a lawman. Others claimed he was a fugitive seeking redemption. What everyone agreed on was his unwavering sense of justice. Time and again, Clay had intervened to protect those who could not defend themselves, stepping in during bar fights or disputes that threatened to escalate into violence. The townspeople respected him, yet they also feared his quiet intensity. He rarely engaged in conversations but seemed to have an uncanny ability to read the room, sensing when tensions flared and ready to act when needed. As news of James's lynching spread, Clay felt an unsettling shift in the air. The cries for vengeance from the mob echoed in his mind, stirring a deep-rooted desire to confront the wrongs that plagued the town. He watched from a distance, knowing that the time for silence was drawing to an end. The cowboy's heart stirred with a determination to stand against the rising tide of injustice, ready to become the hero that Clara and the town so desperately needed. As night fell over the town, a heavy silence settled in, broken only by the murmurs of the mob gathering near the old oak tree. Shadows danced under the flickering lanterns as anger and fear fueled the crowd's fervor. Faces twisted with rage, people rallied together, driven by a shared desire for retribution against those they deemed responsible for their suffering. In their minds, justice had become an act of violence rather than a path to healing. With torches in hand, the mob marched through the darkened streets, their footsteps echoing like thunder. The air crackled with tension, and excitement stirred in their hearts. They felt powerful in their numbers, convinced they were avenging a wrong that demanded blood. Nobody stopped to consider the consequences or question if they were truly fighting for justice or simply giving in to primal instincts. As they reached the oak tree where James's lifeless body had been left hanging, a chilling realization washed over Clara's heart when she learned what was about to unfold. The town had crossed a line. There would be no turning back. The lynching began to take shape under the moonlight, with ropes intertwined and knots pulled tight. It was a tragic display of how quickly humanity could dissolve into chaos when darkness took hold. An unforgettable moment that would ripple through the town long after dawn broke. As the mob surged forward, Clay felt a fire igniting within him. He couldn't just stand by and watch as injustice unfolded before his eyes. With a deep breath, he stepped forward from the shadows, his presence commanding immediate attention from the gathered crowd. The flicker of lanterns illuminated his determined face, and for a moment, silence fell over the chaos. "Stop!" Clay's voice rang out, strong and clear against the backdrop of anger. The crowd hesitated, their fervor momentarily caught off guard by this lone figure who dared to challenge them. This man deserves justice, not vengeance. With that declaration, he moved closer to the tree, where James's body hung. Holding steady against the rising tide of hostility, Clay reached for his trusty knife, a blade that had seen its fair share of wear. As he climbed up to cut the rope, whispers turned into shouts of disbelief. Some in the crowd urged him on with angry threats while others stared in stunned silence at this act of defiance. With a swift motion, Clay severed the rope, and James's body fell softly to the ground. He knelt beside it, cradling it gently as Clara rushed forward, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, Clay embodied courage and moral conviction, defying the mob and standing for what was right even in the face of danger. He understood that true justice required more than bloodshed. It demanded compassion and truth. The town was heavy with sorrow as dawn broke, casting a pale light over the aftermath of the lynching. Clara knelt beside James's still form, her heart shattered into a million pieces. The love they had shared felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the brutal reality of his death. Tears streamed down her face, each drop carrying her grief and anger. She caressed his cheek, whispering promises of justice that now seemed impossibly far away. The sight of her husband, once full of life and laughter, now lifeless before her, ignited a fire within Clara. While she mourned deeply for the man who had been her partner, she also felt an overwhelming rage toward those who had taken him from her. How could they claim to seek justice while acting so cruelly? The mob's chants for vengeance echoed in her mind, drowning out the sounds of the waking town. Clay, the silent cowboy, stood nearby, watching as Clara grappled with her pain. He understood the weight of loss and the longing for retribution. Yet he also knew that true healing could not come from more violence. As Clara looked up at him, their eyes met. A silent agreement formed between them. Together, they would confront the darkness that clouded their lives and fight for justice in James's name, turning their grief into a powerful force for change. The mob's reaction to Clay's intervention was swift and furious. As he cradled James's lifeless body, shouts erupted from the crowd, their faces contorted with rage. "You dare defy us?" one man bellowed, stepping forward, fists clenched tightly. The whispers of dissent grew louder, and the mob shifted restlessly, their thirst for vengeance intensifying in the wake of Clay's challenge. Some members began to call for retribution against the silent cowboy, claiming he had dishonored their cause. "He's no better than the man we just punished," another voice shouted, igniting a new wave of anger. In their minds, Clay represented everything they despised, a challenge to their twisted sense of justice and an obstacle in their quest for blood. As the tension escalated, a few men stepped forward with dark intentions, ropes in hand. Their plan was clear. They sought to turn their frustration into action by targeting the very man who had stood up for mercy. With eyes blazing, they beckoned others to join them, eager to hunt down the cowboy and teach him a lesson about crossing the line. But amid the chaos, Clara saw an opportunity. She stepped out from behind Clay, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This isn't justice, it's madness," she cried, rallying those still capable of reason. Her plea hung in the air, providing a momentary pause as both sides faced the reality of what lay ahead. A choice between vengeance and understanding. Under the dim light of dawn, the mob seethed with anger, their desire for vengeance morphing into a chilling determination. They gathered in a shadowy corner of the town, murmuring fiercely about the silent cowboy who had dared to challenge them. Fueled by fear and a thirst for retribution, a few men took it upon themselves to create a new noose, a symbol of their intent to assert dominance over what they perceived as defiance. With grim faces, they twisted the rope tightly, hands working feverishly as they prepared for what they believed was their only path to justice. Whispers of "we must make an example of him" echoed among the group, revealing how easily fear could drive people to commit heinous acts. In their minds, the cowboys' act of mercy was a direct threat to their power and their understanding of justice. As they completed the noose, a sense of dread filled the air, heavy with anticipation for what was to come. The men exchanged glances, united by their misguided beliefs and fueled by a growing rage. They knew that if they did not act swiftly, their hold over the town would weaken. In that moment, the mob transformed from grieving townsfolk into something darker. A collective force driven not by reason but by fear. They were ready to unleash another wave of violence that would deepen the wounds already festering within their community. The tension in the air was palpable as Clay stood firm, facing the mob with unwavering resolve. The fresh noose swung ominously from the hands of the men who had once been his neighbors, but now appeared as shadows of their former selves, driven by fear and anger. Clay could see the turmoil within their eyes, a mix of rage and uncertainty, reflecting a community torn apart by violence. "Enough," he called out, his voice steady yet commanding. "This isn't justice. It's revenge masked as righteousness." His words cut through the chaos like a knife, stirring something within those who still held onto a thread of reason. The mob hesitated, their advance faltering as they weighed his challenge against their thirst for vengeance. "You think you can protect him?" one man shouted back, brandishing the noose defiantly. The discord between courage and fear was evident in every face. Clara stepped beside Clay, her expression fierce and resolute. "He is right. Your anger will only lead to more pain," she added, her voice rising above the din. In that standoff, courage stood opposite fear, a defining moment where both sides faced the truth of their choices. Would they succumb to their darkness or find a way to heal? As Clay and Clara held their ground, they embodied the hope for understanding that remained just beyond grasp in this fractured town, waiting for someone to take that leap towards reconciliation. The standoff lingered, charged with emotion as the townsfolk wrestled with their choices. Slowly, the gravity of Clay and Clara's words began to sink in, piercing through the thick fog of anger and fear. Faces once twisted in rage now softened, revealing doubt and uncertainty as they contemplated the consequences of their actions. What justice had they sought? They now wondered, and at what cost? One elder stepped forward, his voice trembling but resolute. "We've lost our way," he admitted, casting his gaze over the crowd. "In our pursuit of vengeance, we've forgotten what it means to be a community." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering as others began to reflect on their actions, the mob mentality that had gripped them and driven them into darkness. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting light on both Clay and Clara, the townsfolk realized they had a choice: to continue down the path of violence or to seek redemption and healing. With heavy hearts, they began to lay down their makeshift weapons and ropes, acknowledging that true justice could not be found in bloodshed. Clay stepped forward once more, meeting Clara's gaze. "Together we can rebuild," he said. "Let us honor James by choosing compassion over cruelty." In that moment of shared understanding, the community took its first step toward healing. A difficult journey ahead, but one rooted in the quest for true justice and unity. As the sun rose higher, casting golden rays over the town, a sense of renewed hope filled the air. The community that had once been shrouded in darkness now stood together, united in their resolve to embrace a new path. Clay and Clara watched as neighbors began to speak with one another, sharing stories and sorrow, slowly stitching together the frayed fabric of their relationships. The elder who had spoken earlier called for a gathering at the town square, inviting everyone to discuss how they could prevent such darkness from consuming their lives again. No longer driven by fear and anger, they envisioned a future where compassion reigned over vengeance. The wounds of loss would take time to heal, but for the first time, they felt they could face them together. Clara felt a weight lift from her heart as she witnessed this transformation. She knew that James would be proud of the courage his memory inspired in this town. Clay stood beside her, reflecting silently on how far they had come from that fateful night. As conversations flourished and plans for a community gathering took shape, it became clear that reconciliation was possible. While the journey ahead would be challenging, the townsfolk were ready to move forward, fostering understanding and healing in place of old grievances. With each step taken toward unity, hope blossomed anew in their small town. Life would return to its streets once again, vibrant and full of promise.